There is a new director of the Nevada Department of Corrections. He was rehired as the leader of NDOC as Nevada's prison system remains under intense scrutiny. The former director resigned after a high-profile prison escape. Tonight, Kim Passoff has the one-on-one interview with how he plans to turn things around. Kim?
Yeah, so you may remember back in September, a convicted killer, Porfirio Duarte Herrera, broke out of Southern Desert Correctional Center near Indian Springs. It was several days before the Department of Corrections even knew that he was gone. He was ultimately arrested after about a week on the run at a Las Vegas bus depot with a ticket out of the country. That debacle led to calls for prison reform, with unions insisting that they need more staff and the Department of Corrections calling for stricter security. Ultimately, the head of NDOC, Charles Daniels, lost his job. Now, Governor Joe Lombardo has chosen a familiar face, James Zarenda, the former director of the Nevada Department of Corrections from 2016 to 2019, has been reappointed to lead the post.
Only way the agency can go is better.
James Zarenda says the escape of an inmate, putting a life-size dummy in his bed and using battery acid to get out of his cell is something that never should have happened.
First of all, it's hard to believe, but the second thing is to me, it shows that they did not follow basic training. You're trained when you're very first day starting off as a correction officer, you look for living, breathing flesh when you do your counts.
Even if training of correctional officers failed, the prison itself should have prevented an escape, but fencing was faulty.
You have a facility that was built on a side of a mountain. The water that comes down there erodes all under the fences.
Zarenda says those issues are now being addressed to ensure an escape will never happen again.
Right now, it's just stressing and doing retraining of the staff. That's just one piece, and really going over the procedures on re-educating on what the basic training is.
Since accepting the position and doing an analysis of what the department needs, Zarenda sees the biggest issue as staffing.
The rural area facilities like Ely and Lovelock, right now they're at 45% and 50% vacancies. I don't even know how they're even running those facilities as well as they are. So my staffing is a big deal.
He says there is money to hire, and they are now beginning a big recruiting push using private companies.
What they'll do is they'll find those companies that are going out of businesses or laying off, and they target those employees to try to recruit them to come over to Nevada.
He also wants to allow more people into the prisons to work with offenders, families, volunteers, even successful ex-cons, to prepare them for re-entry into society, because 90% of the prison population will one day be released.
If we do not do this correctly, then you're going to see victimization increasing when they get out into the community. So what I do has to work. I know how to get it there, and I will get it there. And Zarenda says his biggest goal is to bring Nevada prisons up to national accreditation standards. He's also behind a bill in front of the legislature right now to bring tablets that do not connect to the internet to all prisoners. That could call for guards for help, monitor mental health, and even access the law library, something that you will already find in most prisons across America. John?
Kim, thank you. The department also announced in November it would close a prison in Carson City due to staffing shortages.